Esteemed guests, distinguished leaders, friends. We are gathered today to talk about something that touches every single life on this planet, yet it remains shrouded in silence and stigma. We are here to talk about the inner architecture of the human mind, the engine of our creativity, our empathy, and our progress. We are here to talk about the psychology of mental health, and why understanding it is not merely a matter of personal wellness, but the single most critical investment we can make in the future of our society, our economy, and our collective peace. Let's begin by speaking a simple truth. There is no such thing as physical health without mental health. They are not two separate entities, but two sides of the same coin. When we talk about a broken leg or a failing heart, we rush to treat it. But when the mind, the very essence of who we are, is in distress, we often tell people to simply get over it, to be stronger. This disconnect, this profound failure to acknowledge reality, is a crisis of policy and a crisis of humanity. The reality, proven by decades of psychological science, is that our brains are powerful, complex organs that respond to the world around us with biological, measurable changes. Stress isn't just a bad mood, it's a surge of the hormone cortisol that, over time, changes the structure of brain cells, weakening the immune system and increasing the risk of diseases like heart disease and diabetes. Anxiety is not a character flaw, it is the fight-or-flight system, designed to save our ancestors from lions, stuck in the on position, constantly signaling danger when none exists. Depression is not sadness. It is a clinical condition characterized by changes in neurotransmitter function and activity in the prefrontal cortex, robbing a person of their ability to feel joy, motivation, or hope. We must strip away the myths and see mental health for what it truly is, a spectrum of well-being that every person moves along throughout their life. It is not a binary state. You are not either mentally ill or perfectly fine. You are somewhere in between, constantly navigating life's pressures, and at any moment, circumstances, a job loss, a pandemic, a national tragedy, can push you closer to the edge. This is the lesson for the general public. You are not weak for struggling. Your struggle is a predictable, biological response to overwhelming internal or external pressure. It is a signal, not a failing. Just as you wouldn't feel shame for getting a fever when fighting an infection, you should not feel shame for experiencing anxiety when fighting through a period of immense stress. Seek help, talk about it, and treat it with the same urgency you would a medical symptom. Now, let us turn our attention to the more difficult and often ignored truth, the systemic and societal toll of this silent crisis, which must serve as a profound lesson for our leaders and policymakers. The cost of ignoring the psychology of mental health is staggering. It is measured in productivity lost, in healthcare budgets strained, and most tragically, in human lives extinguished too soon. The World Health Organization estimates that depression and anxiety alone cost the global economy $1 trillion annually in lost productivity. This is not a soft cost. It is a hard, financial drain on every nation. When a worker is struggling with untreated depression, they are not present, not engaged, and not productive. When a student is gripped by anxiety, their potential is capped, and their educational investment is wasted. Our economy runs on human capital, and when the mind is compromised, the capital depreciates rapidly. But the lesson for leaders must go deeper than economics. It must touch upon our foundational institutions, particularly the agencies responsible for public safety, like our police and emergency services. These individuals are subjected to continuous, cumulative trauma, a concept psychologists call secondary trauma or compassion fatigue. They witness the worst of humanity, they deal with crisis after crisis, and they are asked to simply return to duty the next day, expected to be unemotional robots. This constant exposure to trauma doesn't just make them tired, it changes their brains. It elevates their baseline level of stress, compromises their judgment, and can lead to burnout, poor decision-making, and even hyperaggression. The psychology here is clear. Untreated trauma in public safety personnel becomes a risk to the very public they are sworn to protect. The lesson for every police command and every legislative body is this: investing in the mental health of first responders is not a perk, it is essential operational risk management. It means moving beyond a single, annual checkup to creating a culture of preventative mental wellness. It means providing confidential, mandatory check-ins with culturally competent psychologists. It means recognizing that the armor they wear on the outside is useless if they are crumbling on the inside. We owe them more than a badge, we owe them a mechanism for healing. The most powerful truth in psychology is that prevention is cheaper and more effective than treatment. Our current system is designed to catch people after they have fallen. We must instead focus on the science of resilience, the psychological factors that build strong, flexible minds from the ground up. This begins with acknowledging the absolute critical importance of early childhood mental health. The first 5 years of life are when the foundational architecture of the brain is built. Exposure to chronic stress, neglect, or trauma, what we call adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, can permanently alter the stress response system, programming a child for a lifetime of heightened risk for mental and physical illness. Therefore, our national strategy must pivot. We need to invest heavily in programs that support parental mental health, provide robust early learning environments that foster social-emotional skills, and train every teacher, pediatrician, and community worker to recognize the early signs of distress, not just in children, but in the families around them. This is the ultimate preventative measure, cutting off the generational transfer of trauma and distress at its root. Consider the simple psychological concept of locus of control. When people feel they have control over their lives, over their finances, their housing, their safety, they are psychologically healthier. When external forces strip away that control, through poverty, systemic discrimination, or constant uncertainty, it creates a state of learned helplessness, a central feature in many depressive and anxious disorders. Thus, mental health policy is not just about therapy, it is also about economic justice, secure housing, and accessible education. A government that fails to address these societal stressors is, by definition, worsening the mental health of its population. Let us also confront the truth of our digital age. Never before has the human brain been subjected to such a continuous, overwhelming deluge of information and social comparison. The psychology of social media is built around the manipulation of our dopamine reward pathways, creating a system designed for addiction, not connection. We receive intermittent, unpredictable rewards, a like, a comment, which keeps us compulsively checking, driving up anxiety and lowering self-esteem as we constantly compare our messy, complex reality to the curated, impossible perfection of online life. This is not anecdotal, it is a measurable psychological phenomenon. The lesson here for the public is to practice radical self-awareness and digital hygiene, recognizing when the device serves you and when it controls you. The lesson for leaders is to hold technology platforms accountable for the psychological impact of their design. We regulate food safety, we regulate air quality. We must begin to consider the ethical and psychological safety of the environments we permit to exist within our minds. We must also overhaul the legal and correctional response to mental illness, a system that currently operates on cruelty rather than compassion. When a person with severe mental illness is in crisis, the default response is often law enforcement, leading to incarceration, which only exacerbates their condition. Jails and prisons have become the largest psychiatric facilities in many regions, a monument to our failure to provide community-based care. The psychology of rehabilitation tells us that healing requires structure, support, connection, and dignity, the very things systematically removed by the correctional environment. The truth is that the person experiencing psychosis needs a clinician, not a cell. The lesson for our legal system is the urgent need to detask the police from mental health crises and establish well-funded, 24/7 mobile crisis teams led by mental health professionals. We need therapeutic jurisprudence, diverting individuals with treatable conditions out of the courts and into proper care pathways, recognizing that a mind in distress is a condition to be treated, not a crime to be punished. Finally, we must talk about the power of hope and connection. The central finding of all psychological research into healing is that the therapeutic relationship itself, the human connection, the feeling of being seen and understood, is the most potent catalyst for change. The antidote to isolation is community. The cure for despair is purpose. The strength of our society, therefore, will be measured not by our military might or our financial wealth, but by the safety net of empathy and support we weave for the most vulnerable among us. We are all interconnected. When one member of the community struggles, we all pay the price. When one mind heals, the entire community benefits from their reclaimed creativity, energy, and love. Understanding the psychology of mental health is not an academic exercise, it is a moral imperative. It is the framework for building a society that is not just prosperous, but genuinely kind. Let this be the moment when we stop whispering and start funding, when we stop judging and start supporting, and when we finally acknowledge that investing in the mind is investing in everything. The truth is simple, the lesson is clear, and the time for action is now. Let us move forward, together, toward a future where mental health is truly seen as the essential human right it is. Thank you.